any or all part of people that might have an interest in Minnesota education. So how does it work? Okay, first and foremost, you have a board of directors, and this board of directors consists of all the student body presidents of all these 7 state universities in the MnSCU system. So ourselves, Bemidji, Metro, Southwest, St. Cloud, Mankato, and Winona. We got all of them right there. So we represent you. We're elected as student body presidents, and collectively we form the board of directors. Board of directors, in turn, manages the executive board, the state chair, the vice chair, and the treasurer. Our own treasurer for MSUSA this year is Richa Nupani. She's a MSUM student and a former student senator. We manage the professional staff and the campus committees who then spread MSUSA at each of the individual campuses. So now we come into the meat and potatoes. What is Charting the Future? Okay, Charting the Future seeks to reform the state system of colleges and universities. This program was introduced by the chancellor about 2 years ago now. The latest published version of it was in November 20th of 2013, okay? So this is Charting the Future for a Prosperous Minnesota. So for some of you, you may have heard of it. For some of you, you've probably never seen this at all. This hasn't really come to light. It wasn't really a topic of conversation very much at the campus levels until more the last few months and into late last year in the academic year, it really became a topic of conversation. So this is the latest published version of Charting the Future of Minnesota. This program was designed by Chancellor Rosenstone, by the system office and by a company called McKinsey, which we'll come to later, which is an educational consulting company that worked to create this document, which is basically the outlay of what do we want to accomplish at the state level with our colleges and universities over the next, tenure of the chancellor and onward for many years. So with that, I'm going to pass this around. Feel free to look at it at your discretion. As I said, the latest published version of this was November 20th of 2014. The process began when MnSCU applied for a $200,000 grant for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the process design was tasked to McKinsey and Company. So the basis of Charting the Future was that it centered around a couple key recommendations, and we're going to go through them as such. Number one, dramatically increase the success of all learners, especially those in diverse populations traditionally underserved by higher education. 2, develop a collaborative and coordinated academic planning process that advances affordability, transferability, and access to our programs. Certify student competencies and capabilities, expand pathways to accelerate degree completion through the credit for prior learning, and foster the award of competency-based credit and degrees. Expand the innovative use of technology to deliver high-quality online courses, strengthen classroom instruction and student services, and provide more individualization, learning, and advising. Work together under the new models to be the preferred provider of comprehensive workplace solutions through programs and services that build employee skills and solve real-world problems for communities and businesses across the state. Redesign our financial and administrative models to reward collaboration, drive efficiencies, and strengthen our ability to provide access to an extraordinary education for all Minnesotans. So on the surface, they sound pretty good. These are pretty broad goals. They're things that accomplish in education, okay? Now, in order to make those goals happen, we initiated implementation teams. Now, these 8 are the implementation teams: student success, academic planning and collaboration, diversity, comprehensive workplace solutions, system incentives and rewards, information technology, the steering committee, which is kind of the main, driving all of these committees all at once, why we call it steering, and competency certification and credit for prior learning. Now, collectively, all of these implementation teams come together and we decide, how are we going to do this? How are we going to fulfill our promise? How are we going to deliver on these things, on these goals that we've set out for Minnesota education? We started to have a problem with this up front. One of the issues we had was, again, MSUSA represents you at the state level, and we represent you to the MnSCU office. So with that being said, we had a little bit of a problem. Now, at a maximum, these teams, these implementation teams, are made up of 18 members, one of which is an MSUSA rep, okay? So let's put that in perspective for a minute. Problems begin. So let's focus for a minute. Let's say this is you, okay? In case you're confused, this is you, okay? So you're an MSUSA rep on one of these committees, okay? Well, we've got somebody from the IFO maybe a couple system presidents, some people from the system office, guy from this unit, and them. You starting to see a problem with this a little bit? It bothers me a little bit, okay? Now, the more astute among you might say, well, Cody, that's not 18, to which I say, you're correct. Now we have 18. You see the problem here? Okay, so that was a problem MSUSA had from the beginning. We didn't like the style of the implementation teams. We didn't like the makeup. We didn't like how our voices didn't seem to have as much weight or as much value as some of the other parties that were coming to the table. So at the end of the day, a lot of ducks, not a lot of kitties, and that was a problem. Okay, this infographic created by our excellent PR team kind of actually really accurately lays this out. Now, looking across the state line, 500 out of 430,000 students have provided input. Now that's across the entire thing. Now, when you are expected to be the chief recipient of the benefits and also, mind you, the chief recipient of the bill, that's a little bit of a problem. Your voices need to be brought to the table, okay? 1 in 9 implementation teams have not met. Now that's sort of a half-truth. Only one of them has met regularly and has been meeting periodically, and that is Workforce Development Solutions. We'll come back to that. One thing about these committees is that they don't vote. That was a problem we had at the MSUSA level. So meaning that when you have this committee and we're bringing input to the table, these people who are leading the committees, who are trained by McKinsey & Company, which we'll come back to again later, there's no voting. So there's an acknowledgement that, yes, we'll take your input and we'll talk about it. Thank you for doing what you do. And then we move on with business, okay? We had a little bit of a problem with that, and yet still more problems. One of the big problems we had was the relevancy of the McKinsey document. So some of you, if you've been paying to, if you listen to a lot of NPR or read the Pioneer Press, or really if you've been paying to any attention to Minnesota education over this last summer, and more recently as well, you may have heard of the McKinsey document. And the McKinsey document is the implementation plan. Now, McKinsey was hired for $2 million, a process we'll come back to later. And in order for them to do what they do, we needed a contract and we needed the McKinsey plan. Now, how many of you, by show of hands, went to the gallery walks yesterday or participated in the student luncheon? Okay, a few of you. Now, one of the reports that I got back from that luncheon in particular is that when the McKinsey document was brought up, people said that is the contract. People from the system office said that's the contract. That's not the truth, okay? There are two very separate documents here. This one being the contract, and this one being the McKinsey document, which we'll come back to again. Now, the contract is pretty cut and dry. It says professional technical services contract. It's hard to get them confused, okay? But we come to the McKinsey document, and this is a problem, okay? And this is really where part of my frustrations and part of my bias is going to creep in. Now, I'm going to try and remain as unbiased as I can, but I'm not going to promise a whole lot because I'm a little bit pissed off about this, okay? So here in my hands, I have the McKinsey contract, or the McKinsey document. See, even I'm doing it now. And the McKinsey document represents the implementation of Charting the Future. How do we make it work? How are we going to do what we intend to do? This is about $2 million, and this is $2 million of student fees. And if you are a citizen coming to visit us today, this is your money too, because the system office has two revenue streams, the state and the students being the heavier of the two, but the state play a big role in that as well through your state tax dollars, okay? So this is $2 million, okay? So how many of you, by show of hands, want to know what your money bought? Okay, pretty good. And that's Charting the Future. Thank you for coming. This is a problem, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to pass this around as well. Maybe you can unearth something that I haven't, but I spent a lot of time on that document. So we had a problem with that. Next, we come to a Pioneer Press article. For those of you that read the Pioneer Press, the $2 million contract in question raised a lot of questions. A lot of people were uncomfortable about it. One of the reasons they were uncomfortable about it was because the Board of Trustees and the students and a lot of the faculty didn't find out about the $2 million contract from the Chancellor of the System Office themselves. They found out from this Pioneer Press article. That upset them just a little bit, understandably. They didn't hear it from the Chancellor themselves, and in fact had to hear it from a local newspaper. Arguably my favorite quote from this article, and I've included this this whole publication, this whole PowerPoint will also be made available and made public, so if you want to check it out, you want to check my sources, feel free, this will all be made available to you, and the sources will be cited there, but I'm going to read it. The $2 million contract with McKinsey & Company comes as a surprise to students and faculty involved with Charting the Future of MnSTU's bid to spur innovation and collaboration among its 31 campuses. Chancellor Stephen Rosenstone did not bring up the arrangement with New York-based McKinsey when student asked about the plans, costs, or when he updated the Board of Trustees about the initiative. You know, to put it in comparison, again, back to the ducks, you know, I kind of picture the conversation going something like this. Do you think we should tell the students? Nah. Even if it's their money? Nah. You guys get the point? So, MSUSA decided to respond. Now this, these two motions that you see in front of you came from our delegates conference last April, okay? We presented we presented two options, one of which we wanted to see implemented. Now, the motions, the first one, to sum it up, more of us, less of you, giving everyone an equal 33% split among the stakeholder groups at these implementation meetings, bringing more student input to the process. The second, not as much as what we wanted, but we could live with it, less of you and more equality, bringing student representation to 15%, okay? To cut it down a little bit further, or to flesh it out, we have donated additional campus staff, 4 spaces to student, meaning everyone would have 1/3 representation. At least it's fairly equal at that rate. Or option 2, remove additional campus staff and limit system office staff to 2 slots. System students, presidents, system office would each have 16%, and then faculty and staff with 25%. Not our favorite, but we were willing to budge. And the waiting begins. When we had our last board of directors meeting in September, we brought this up to the chancellor. The chancellor decided to come to our board of directors meeting. And when we were asked about our recommendations for student input, we were met with the answer, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Not exactly what we were looking for. In the meantime, we did continue to participate in Charting the Future. The state chair, Carrie Cooper, was going to stakeholder meetings. You know, we were continuing to try and put input in at the campus level. We were having discussions about it, and we weren't getting anywhere. So unfortunately, we had to move to some secret squirrel business. All right. So heads of stakeholder groups started meeting in secret at the state level. So this is IFO, USAF, MATES. There's a whole list of them. Students being one of them via MSUSA. Okay, so we started, heads of these stakeholder groups started meeting in private, okay? And from that, they came up with an ultimatum. Show us the document, or we will pull our support and our involvement, okay? So essentially, they were giving the chancellor an ultimatum. We want to see the McKinsey document unredacted. How can we react? How can we know if this is a positive program if we can't see what's going on? If our input is not being brought to the table, and if we can't understand and see how this is being implemented. So this ultimatum was presented to the chancellor. He responded to it at our September board meeting, and he wasn't having it. So let's fast forward to some more current times. Last month, the steering committee received MSUSA's request. Actually, it was really more early this month. It was early October. I apologize for that. So the steering committee received MSUSA's request. Now that was State Chair Carrie Cooper went to the steering committee meeting and did not get a very good reaction, namely from the Chancellor and President Potter at St. Cloud, who aggressively and unprofessionally confronted Chair Cooper at the meeting. And this was recounted by multiple stakeholder heads who were there, who thought the reaction was both over the top and unprofessional. Recently on NPR, All Things Considered, for August 24th, they got a hold of it, and I want you guys to hear it for yourselves.
Winona State University faculty passed a vote of no confidence for Rosenstone, and I hear that other campuses are also considering one.
You've been talking to students too, and what do they say?
Well, their leaders share many of the same concerns, but to differing degrees. Some have good experiences working in these committees on the project, but others tell me Rosenstone appears, angry and aggressive when he gets suggestions over things such as power sharing. I spoke with Gary Cooper, president of the University Student Association. He said that at a recent meeting, Rosenstone and a campus president attacked her suggestions and questioned her leadership.
I mean, I left that meeting in tears. I wasn't gonna sit there as a student and be talked to like that from people who are supposed to be supporting me and supposed to be collaborating with me.
What does the administration say about all this?
Well, Minsky's spokeswoman says she wasn't there. She can't dispute Cooper's account of that one meeting. Now, Rosenstone has written to employees and students saying, change is hard, emotion can sometimes run high, and some things could have been handled better. But he says he's doing his best to make sure everyone is treated respectfully. The spokeswoman said leaders have adopted many student policies and really do listen. She showed me a statement of support from the chairman of the trustees. That said, she said they're always willing to talk to faculty leaders.
So how will this actually affect the colleges and universities of Minsk?
Well, not even faculty say they know. I mean, everything is still in the early stages, this whole reform. They said they're not trying to throw a wrench into the process. College faculty say they just wanted to get leaders' attention, and they are open to returning if their concerns are met. University professors said they'll come up with their own ideas for reform in the meantime.
So that was NPR, All Things Considered, just released this week. So where are we now? The MSUSA Board of Directors has not yet come to a conclusive decision unanimously. We really have one of two choices here. Do we support Charting the Future, and should we withdraw? Recently, two major faculty unions withdrew their support from Charting the Future at the state level, so they will no longer be participating in steering group meetings. They will not be participating in implementation. They want out. They don't believe in the process, which is pretty unfortunate. And I think that says a lot about how this process is going and what's going on. However, MSUSA has not yet made a conclusive decision. Now, back in September, I posted a resolution. The resolution is here, and I'll pass this around. St. Cloud and Winona have both posted resolutions in the last 2 weeks. St. Cloud has decided to support Charting the Future and remain involved. Winona has decided to withdraw, or they have not posted their support. I do not know if they wish yet to withdraw, and we'll bring that up in November when we have our next Board of Directors meeting. We still don't have a decision from Metro, Bemidji, Southwest, or Mankato, but I'm sure we will be having one relatively soon as the November conference is coming up very quickly. So let me give a disclaimer here because this is where it gets biased, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, you put me in a position when you voted for me, when you put me in this position to make decisions, okay? And I have a problem with idleness. I don't like to sit still, particularly when this process is not waiting. CTF gets a little bit closer every day. We're almost about a quarter of the way through implementation at this point, okay? So CTF is not waiting. The board has yet to come to a decision, but in mid to late September, I posted Moorhead's stance. And in that stance, I said no. The reason that I have you all here today, first and foremost for the senators, is if you guys choose to make a vote, this is an ad hoc topical meeting where you can get more information and decide to ask more questions. If you're a student, I want to justify my position to you. Now, that being said, this is something we can talk about, but I want to at least give you the opportunity to hear my position and for me to justify it to you, okay? So in this resolution, and I'll pass it around, it kind of goes through a preface that outlines the position and what was going on subjectively through this entire process. But for the purpose of presentation, I'm going to focus on our bill particulars here, okay? 1, the emphasis on aligning majors and academics with workforce needs for Minnesota businesses is at face value harmful to students. While the goal seems admirable and realistic on the surface, it can be inferred that aligning our new course and program offers to regional, state, and workforce needs, as a quote from Charting the Future, may imply a cutting in the liberal arts curriculum that do not necessarily align with workforce needs of large corporations. We, as the students of MSU Moorhead, have already felt cuts in programs, and there are concerns as to who will be setting the agenda. The liberal arts curriculum and a broad exposure to arts, language, culture, and other disciplines associated with the liberal arts are close to the hearts and priorities of students at MSU Moorhead, and their concern with the possible realignment of educational outcomes and who is directing them is a serious area of concern with Charting the Future. 2, the severe lack of consultation with stakeholder groups, particularly students, is completely unacceptable. The current system of consultation toward the primary stakeholders in this endeavor, the students, has been inadequate. The presiding attitude that students should be expected to come to St. Paul to participate in an initiative of which they are the chief recipient of expected benefits and the chief recipient of the bill, and have yet not been afforded an equal opportunity to weigh in on the contents of the initiative and also its implementation. We find the system office urge and pace as both discomforting and disheartening. There must be time to consider the benefits and shortcomings of Charting the Future, and we argue that the proposed galleries and campus visits are triage solutions to a limping process. There will be and must be reform in the process. 3, excessive secrecy to the point of removing any real ability to critique or analyze. The lack of transparency regarding the documents has been an issue of extreme concern from the beginning. If documents regarding the implementation, content, or anything regarding Charting the Future have not been made available for review by the stakeholders, it is a serious problem. The fact that only a few student stakeholders have been able to come to meetings that have been scheduled deliberately to provide an environment not conducive to student input is a problem, and the proposed galleries are a triage solution. We as stakeholders do not want to see an idealized final version, but rather would prefer to be a working member in the process. The process needs to change. 4, concerns over McKinsey and company's involvement and their process. Reviewing the war for talent, it is suggested that the companies had to promote their most talented people aggressively while cleaning the ranks of the least talented post-haste. If this ideology does in fact represent the drive behind this disorder, then the concern is work together under new models to be the preferred provider of comprehensive workforce solutions through programs and services that build employee skills and solve real-world problems for communities and businesses across the state. Or redesign our financial and administrative models to reward collaboration, drive efficiencies, and strengthen our ability to provide access to an extraordinary education for all Minnesotans. Then the concern is what is to be inferred from that philosophy is not positive for any university faculty, academic programs, and overall students. Let it be resolved. The Minnesota State University Moorhead Student Association and President Meyer, as the Moorhead Director for the Minnesota State University Student Association, resolve the board to formally request a stance to be made public from the Board of Directors regarding its official stance on Charting the Future. Furthermore, that the state chair formally requests an unaltered, unredacted copy of the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities System Office Change Management Leadership Document, the McKinsey document, to be presented for review at the next available or specially called meeting of the Board of Directors for the Minnesota State University Student Association. As director for Moorhead, I formally and officially reject Charting the Future. I cannot and will not, on good conscience, accept the process and the intended output of the project. It has since its beginning been secretive, non-inclusive, and harmful to students. I will release a more comprehensive critique and plan for the system in the next few months. However, I formally vote no and will continue my involvement to fight for students. So why is it I have a problem with it? First and foremost, come back to that. Why did I vote no? First and foremost, $2 million. That's a lot of money, ladies and gentlemen, and that's your money. And that's your money that's going unaccounted for. I cannot and will not, on good conscience, allow a process to continue that spends your money if I can't tell you where it's going. I don't know. I don't know how this is going to work, and that's a problem, okay? When it comes to our budget for Senate, if you want to know where our money is going in the Student Senate, you can come to the office. I can show you. We have documents. We keep budgets, everything open. With MSUSA at the state level, if you want to know where the money's going, what's happening, what we're doing, it's open to you. We'll show you. I'll show you how to get there. I'll give you anything you need. At the system office, I would ensure that same accountability. It's irresponsible. And quite frankly, it's disgusting. Your voices have not been valued. I think we made that clear from the beginning with student implementation teams and with the implementation teams at the state level. Your voices have not been heard. They haven't been relevant. Your voices are participating in a non-democratic process, and that's been brought up from multiple stakeholder groups. More than one stakeholder group has brought up that we didn't feel that not only as students, but as them as members of the IFO or whatever faculty union, what have you, they felt that their voices weren't being heard. And if their voices aren't being heard, what does that say about students? That's a problem with me. That's a serious problem with me. Actions of the chancellor and the system office, multiple issues in transparency, accountability, and trustworthiness. So with this McKinsey document, one of the tenets or one of the things that have been said as well, you know, the McKinsey, that was McKinsey who redacted it. No, that is a MnSCU document. That document is property of MnSCU. It belongs to MnSCU, okay? I can't drive that home enough because they have an unredacted copy of it, and they've used it as a weapon. Earlier this year, they invited all 3 heads of the stakeholder groups who were meeting in secret to come and take a look at it, okay? Said, well, you want it so bad, you can take a look at it. But we want you to be involved with the process. You can't take photos. There will be no notes. You can't bring anything back to your stakeholder groups. Essentially, what goes in does not go out. Can't even talk about it. They decided not to, based on integrity. If they could not bring it back to their individual stakeholder groups, and if Chair Cooper could not bring it back to us, then what good was her seeing it, okay? And that's a move I stand by. This same McKinsey document has been used as a weapon. Recently, it has been brought to many different universities' attentions that the system office is willing to show the McKinsey document, granted that they vote yes, they will support Charting the Future. At what point that, if you've already voted yes, you support Charting the Future, really the McKinsey document is really of no concern, but they've used it as a weapon. And that's a problem with me. So I want to open up the floor to questions. Open up about the process, about my stance, about the resolution, about MSUSA, really about any questions that you have. So I'm going to open the floor. You guys have any questions? Chris?
Why did St. Cloud choose to support this Charting the Future?
I wish I could tell you. I don't know. As to whether they've seen the McKinsey document, I don't know. I won't speak to that. I won't speak for St. Cloud, but that being said, they did, however, vote in the affirmative. That's all I know, and that's within their discretion. So,
is it unrealistic to think they may have been strong-armed by their university president?
that is something that could be brought up. Notably, recently the chancellor did call all of the university presidents, asking them to kind of get directors online and to have a talk with them about Charting the Future and about what's going on. And that is one thing I do need to, I do want to make a comment, and that is a positive comment toward Anne Blackhurst. There's something that needs to be understood. She works for the chancellor. We don't. So she's in a position where she rocks a boat that could damage her career. As a student, we're pretty much we're pretty much bulletproof. I've got about a year left of being obnoxious, before they toss me out of here. But that's something that could be inferred. But like I said, I won't speak for St. Cloud. I won't speak for the Senate, and I won't question their integrity. But
do you know thus far who has seen the McKinsey document?
To my knowledge, no one. We know the system office has seen it. None of the stakeholder groups have seen it yet. MSUSA has not seen it, unless individual campuses did, in fact, see it and not tell anybody, which I doubt is the case because that one made a pretty big splash. But I know it was offered to several campuses to be seen in the event that they give an affirmative vote. But as of right now, at this point, I do not know that anyone has seen it. Sean.
Just to add on to that, not even the implementation teams, the people who are supposed to be guiding the process, have seen the McKinsey document. So the people actually on these teams who are supposed to be providing input and guiding it haven't seen the basic plan and outline for what's supposed to happen from the words of the implementation team leaders themselves. So that's just to highlight the secrecy.
Well,
Yeah, so we have a contract and we also have the McKinsey document.
correct. And I think I
so-
sent them both for, oh, no, I've got the contract right here.
Yeah.
I'll send the contract around.
With the contract, why is there even a McKinsey document at all?
So the McKinsey document, the contract lays out, hey, this is our agreement. We agreed to pay you $2 million. You have the services that you're going to give us. The McKinsey document as itself is, this is how we're going to do it. Okay, so we laid out these, a number of these goals. This is how we're going to do it. So if that means, hey, we're going to implement, such and such a program at such and such a campus. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to expand here. We're going to detract there. All of that is in that document. And that's part of the problem. That's why we want to see it so bad, because from one end, how do we know it's a good process? If we can't see any of it, we can't critique it, we can't analyze it. You paid for it, but you can't see it. And that's a problem with me, all right? Especially when I'm not going to sit back idly and watch my students get patted on the head and told that someone else knows what's best for them. I think you guys know what's best for you. And that's been part of my problem with this whole scandal with the McKinsey document. But like I said, the McKinsey document lays out how are we going to do what we set out to do. And that's why we want to see it so bad. And on that same flip side, what's to say that this isn't actually a really good process? And we, maybe we will support CTF, but on the based on some of the behavior that's come out of the system office, based on things that have happened at the state level with some of these implementation teams, I'm going to assume the worst and hope for the best. So, you had a question?
So what can the average student do to voice their opinion or get involved with this?
One of the biggest things is get educated. Know what's going on with CTF. And, if at any time you have friends or you talk to your friends, go back and talk to them, bring them to the office, because I have a whole pull-out drawer. All of these documents are just scratching the surface. I have a whole drawer full of documents based on charting the future. Number one, get educated. Know what's going on, because they're banking on you, ladies and gentlemen. They expect you to not know what is going on. In fact, they profit from it. So the less you know, the better off they are. First and foremost, get educated. Second of it, start talking about it. You know, start asking questions of the system office. Start asking questions of Moorhead. You know, you are in a position where you paid for it. You're in charge here. Okay, this is, you know, I work for you. At the end of the day, you know, you guys are in charge here. Get educated and ask questions, because that's what they fear the most. They don't ask questions. They have an expectation that you're just going to sit idly and you're going to let the big boys take care of what needs to be taken care of. Okay, and that's part of the problem. That's where these secret $2 million contracts come from. That's where implementation teams not listening to students come from. That's where problems with this process have derived from. So get educated, ask questions. Start talking to people. Talk to your legislatures. Talk to President Blackhurst. President Blackhurst has done a phenomenal job, and I will comment on this. She's been very respectful of us as a student association, as a student senate, as MSUSA, in voicing our concerns. Because, like I said, the university presidents are in a position where they support CTF because, yes, we accept CTF. We think it's a good idea. And while the student associations have not had necessarily warm and fuzzy feelings towards it, some of the university presidents have had some serious backlash. We saw it with State Chair Cooper at the steering committee meeting with President Potter. We've seen it at some of the individual campus levels where, university presidents are kind of intimidating their own senates. They're using, their influence as a weapon to bring Senate on board. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth. It's what's happening. And with that, Ann Blackhurst has never once done one of those things. In fact, she pulled me aside in one of our one-on-ones and said that she fully respects and understands our concerns, and she gives us full, she respects our right to organize, to voice our concerns, to talk about. So, bring it up to President Blackhurst, be polite, because she has been very good to us. But that being said, bring it up to her. You see faculty around, you see professors, you see administrators, talk to them about it. But I think, the big three is get educated, ask questions, and keep pushing. So if that really answers your question.
If our school does decide to go charge in the future, then we see that take effect.
That's a good question. We've seen a lot of elements of charting the future have been quietly trying to implement. One of the big ones that have been being pushed at our face at the state level is the Metro Plan. Reading the Metro Plan and comparing it side by side to some of the goals laid out in Charting the Future, they sync up pretty well. We're about a quarter of the way through the implementation process, and I think it's going to be little by little. It's going to be little digestible bites through that entire process. So it's not going to be like, okay, implementation's done, and all of a sudden now it's Charting the Future. I think you're going to see digestible, small portions of it, leading up to this magical date, whenever that is. As to the implementation. Not the best answer, but that's the best I got for you right now, unfortunately. Any more questions? Well,
how did Chancellor Rosenstone spend $2 million without anybody noticing?
The way he was able to do that is the Board of Trustees requires that any contracts that exceed $3 million have to be overseen by the Board of Trustees. $3 million, this contract was $2 million. So just under the cut. Now, just for comparison's sake, something I want you guys to think about. In the University of Minnesota, Board of Trustees has to approve any contract that is $1 million or over. Something to think about. So he was able to do that because it was technically under the cap set, which is $3 million.
Any way to lower that cap set at your level?
You could talk to legislators. There's a particular number of legislatures who are interested in more oversight from MnSCUP. Quite frankly, I'd be interested in more oversight from MnSCUP. I'll be releasing a set of documents. The early goal was this Friday. I don't think I'm going to make this Friday, but by next week, a series of 6 documents that encompass a set of educational goals that I've based from other educational sources around the state, from other programs that happen around the country, because I think we can do better. Again, I'm not going to sit idly while students are patted on the head and said, someone else knows better. Just let us handle it. I don't believe in that. I don't believe that's democratic. I don't believe that's ethical. I don't believe anything about it. So, talk to your legislators. especially during election time. They'll listen. So what are the questions?
Okay, so the logistics of this are put together largely by the McKinsey Group?
Correct.
Okay, and do you have any background information about the McKinsey Group?
We have some. McKinsey, behind Enron, if you guys have heard of Enron. They were behind was it 2007, 2008?
The AOL Time Warner merger.
They've been a big consulting company, namely in private business for most of their life. They've been successful. Obviously, they've made it this far. They've been around for many, many years, many decades. But with that being said, around mid to late 2000 area, they started looking at education. Why? Well, because there's a lot of money in education. So they started getting involved with educational consulting. Currently, they are a part of a much larger program. Now they're doing Charting the Future here in Minnesota. They're also doing several other programs in several other states. One of the ones that have come as a point of concern are in New York, where they're focusing a lot on educational technology and delivering online classes to students. Again, a lot of it sounds really good on the surface. When we start digging down, a lot of these programs don't work, and there's been a lot of concern. Beyond that, they've been a big area of concern in a lot of different educational outputs that they did. A couple of years ago, they were involved with K through 12 education in St. Paul, which was an area that was very heavily contested. Their involvement was questioned, and the output of their involvement was also very, very heavily questioned. So there's just a little bit of background. If you ever want more, please feel free to join me in the office. I've got a whole dossier on everything McKinsey. So.
Where will these slides be made available?
I will make them available not only on the Student Senate page, but I've actually recently started a new blog called Charting Moorhead's Future, which I'll put my series of documents on as well. I'll post that URL publicly on Facebook, Twitter. You can also on the Student Senate page, so we'll make those available. And we'll probably put them on the Student Senate website as well. So we'll make sure those get public. Any more questions? So everything's quieted down a little bit. So I want to kind of talk with the audience a little bit, and I want to get some of your impressions. First and foremost, impression on Charting the Future, but also about my resolution, because two of the reasons I'm here today is to address the Senate, but also to justify my position to you. Do you feel that my position was correct? Do you feel I was correct in some of my assumptions and some of my feelings? So why don't we start at the end here, and we'll work our way all the way around. So what do you think?
Impressions in general?
Impressions of anything.
I'd say I'm really unfamiliar with this. This is the first time I've heard about this. But I feel very comfortable with your stance and transparency and everything. And in dealing with people's money, people want to know.
Yeah.
So I'll do my own research and stuff, but I'm pretty comfortable where you have things in terms of your main stance. So.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. If you have to hide things from people, I feel like they can't really be all that good if you're saying these things, but then you don't have proof to back it up, and I need that proof to go for something.
Quentin, what do you think?
Well, I've already heard this from most of it once before, so as I get to know more about it, I just don't like it a little bit more, a little bit at a time. So, yeah.
I feel I agree with your stance. You're thinking more ethical, thinking of people's desires rather than throwing money away to what you would hope.
Mm-hmm.
You need facts to back up, really.
So, Cobbs, what do you think?
Well, I mean, my opinion on it. I think that it kind of defeats the purpose of a liberal arts college when they, make all the programs suited for the workforce. 'Cause, I mean, you can go to tech college if you want that. I don't know.
It just seems pretty clearly an abuse of power, so I think we're handling it appropriately.
This is the first time I've really talked about Charting the Future. I completely agree with your position.
Same generally as everyone else. The only really good things that I've heard on it, very little I know with emails from Chancellor Rosenstone. So I need to look into it more, but I feel comfortable with you given.
feel as if students are being underrepresented and over marginalized in this process. And that's extremely difficult for me because a lot of people throughout the course of history have worked so hard to get their voices heard that we're easily getting oppressed like this. I'm not necessarily saying I disagree with charting the future. I just want to know how it's getting planned.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're trying to convey. And I think that's it. I just want to make sure we don't blur the line on being anti-charting the future. But I do agree with you saying we need to know what's going on. And until that time, I will work to oppose that. So I think
that's good input.
I think you're in the right there.
Thank you, Bo. Jonas, what do you think?
I don't really have a lot to say about it. I have kind of my own opinions, but I guess what I will share is what I told the forum yesterday is that I'm really concerned about the students' input in the actual document for Charting the Future.
Jenna, what do you think?
Oh yeah, I feel like I agree with what you said so far, and we have the right to know what's going on.
I guess to reiterate what everyone says, until students have a voice in it, I'm opposed to it, and until that implementation, I guess helping out with the process. No.
Chris? I really don't like the committee aspect of this and how fast it was rushed. I was here last semester when it started, and from when it started to now, it moved light speed ahead. I think they're rushing it, even not taking anyone's voice into consideration.
I think you bring up a good point. That was another point that MSUSA was very concerned about, was the speed that all of this was being implemented at. Why do we have to move so quickly? In fact, one of crossing that bridge, that was actually in response. That was the same quote was given to us in response. Why are we moving so quickly? So I think you bring up a very good point. Speed and implementation was a big area of concern. Michaela, what do you think?
I definitely agree with Bo and you, and it's just we should know where our money is going, and it seems a little sketchy the way that they're going about it if it's supposed to be affecting us, and we can't know anything about it.
Matt, what do you think?
Well, as a community member, it doesn't really affect me as much, but I do admire what you're doing. How much longer do you have in your position again?
Till May.
Okay. You're pushing really hard right now with what you've got, which sounds like you have a lot of support here. That's good. But do you have a plan for afterwards? Do you like the next person to be in your position? Or are they
I do. And that is part of the 6-document series that I'll release on the. I don't want to give too much away at this moment, but with that being said, that will also be released.
Awesome. Okay, well, I think it should make everybody feel a little better too. Anyway, but yeah, good job.
Nathan, what do you think?
Me personally, I would really like to know where my money's going and what they're doing with it. I really agree with the way you're going about it with transparency.
Great.
I don't think that it's like McKinsey document that companies like place to put to write documents for us, especially and to put it in a position where we can't see what's happening or what's going on. I don't think that they have really the right to do that. I don't agree that that we should be able to have $2 million of our money being spent without us knowing. I'd rather know where every penny is going, and so I completely disagree with that. I'm not, like Bo said, I'm not completely against starting the future idea yet, but the idea of not knowing where my money is going, and companies that I feel shouldn't be working with my money should be in a position where they can.
Definitely agree with your stance, and yeah, pay a lot of that money going to school, so we should have that.
That's very true. Randall, what do you think?
I really don't like how they already know, like they already have a plan on what they're going to do with change everything. The fact that they don't have, well, first off, we don't get to know how they're going to do it. And moreover, how we don't even have input on how it should be done. Or we think it should be, what we think should be done to change things.
I feel like we're being undermined. I feel like overlooking us as a student and what we see, and it's our money. It's everyone's money, I guess. In point to being the community has to pay for taxes, but it's our money and how we use it. We should be able to know how it, where it goes and who goes to and how it affects.
So
first off, it's hard to judge it just from the simple fact that you really don't know what's going on. There's a lot of rhetoric involved in it, but there's not a lot of substantial plans. And maybe there are, but we just don't get to know about them. But from the things that I have heard about it, from what I understand, it seems like it's almost more of a kind of a job training type thing. Is that correct?
That could be argued, absolutely.
And so then, I mean, one of my biggest worries there is training and education are different things. They're similar in some ways, but they're different things. And so by allocating more of our budget to this training in specific for specific jobs, how much does that take away from our education? You know, and that's one of the biggest concerns. And obviously, we don't really know much about it yet, just for the simple fact that they're keeping everything secret. So.
Shane, Kelly, what do you think?
I just got here, so sorry. I was under when this first came out, and I'm not going to share my personal opinion because I'm working right now, but I am happy to see that students are actively involved in finding out where their money's going. It's good to see students actually making sure that the school and the system is accountable for their needs and not somebody else's pocket.
Absolutely. Mayor Delray, what do you think?
I mostly came to listen, Cody, but I'm a big fan of transparency, and I can understand why that would be worrisome. Good thing, you said the one group that is actually meeting is the workforce.
Workforce, yes.
So that's interesting to me because with lack of transparency mixed with that and the speed, I'm kind of with John. It feels like there was assumptions done before in the first place, if I was guessing.
And that's been a serious concern, and that has been brought up at the board of directors. So I think you share that concern with a lot of individuals. So we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Sushma, what do you think?
I'm going to learn more. Today, I came to know that the students will be marginalized. So I don't know what it goes in.
Absolutely.
I agree that the students will be more and that we all should be more educated on them. But it's also something that they say that it's too fun for them, but we can't see that.
Definitely. So with that being said, if you, oh, sorry, go on.
So I thought of one more point, and it can be described in 5 words. Why aren't students taken seriously?
That's a very good point.
Like, it just really made me angry that the chancellor and President Potter felt that they could verbally attack somebody and tell them that they had no idea what their constituency wanted. And I guess maybe you can't answer that, but doesn't that seem like the $2 million question?
Absolutely. I think you bring up a good point. You know, the biggest point, again, coming back to the beginning, the biggest point was introducing this to students and introducing this to senators who had not heard it. Now, I made a position. And I made a position on behalf of Moorhead. And I'm of the firm belief that as your representative official at MSUSA, as your student body president, you've entrusted me with a responsibility. And that responsibility is to sometimes make decisions, even when I don't have all the information. I have to go on my gut, I have to go on what I know is right, and I have to go on what I know you as students value. And that's what I feel I did with my resolution and with my continued questions, concerns, and an active fight against CTF. There where we get what we want, where we get the equal representation, where we get to see a product that is more reflective of what we want as students. But until that day, and until that we have gotten that representation, and we've gotten that input, and we've gotten correction in the process, I will continue to fight it tooth and nail. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming. Please continue to engage with the Senate. Again, please feel free to stop in any time. I have a whole collection of drawers, pro and anti-CTF information, and I want you guys to get educated. That is the #1 thing, because that's what we're here for, education. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming.